right, folks, let's dive right into this one, because you're not going to believe where this story goes. But before we start, let me ask you something. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or town in the comments below. I love seeing how far these stories reach.
All right, so this is one of those things you never imagine will happen to you. Like, not even in your worst nightmares. But here I am, trying to make sense of it all, and wondering how people who are supposed to love me could do something so unbelievably cruel. For context, I'm a 34-year-old guy living in Atlanta, Georgia. My wife, Emily, passed away 2 years ago. Even typing that still feels unreal. She was my everything. We were married for 5 amazing years, and then, out of nowhere, she was gone. It wasn't something we saw coming. One day she was fine, and the next she was in the hospital. They said it was an aneurysm. One minute we were laughing about what to order for dinner, and the next my entire world fell apart. Since then, I've been trying to piece my life back together, but it's been hard. Like really hard. I still live in the house we bought together. It's a small 2-bedroom in the suburbs, nothing fancy, but it was ours. Every corner of it reminds me of her. The way she decorated the living room with her favourite green throw pillows, the bookshelves filled with her dog-eared paperbacks. Her perfume bottle still sits on the dresser in our bedroom. It's probably silly, but keeping her things around makes me feel close to her, like she's still here in some way. One thing I've never been able to bring myself to move is her wedding dress. It's still in the garment bag, hanging in the back of our closet. She looked so beautiful in that dress, like it wasn't just her walking down the aisle, it was the happiest moment of our lives stitched into fabric. I couldn't let it go. Same with her journals, her favourite earrings, the stack of Polaroids she took of us during weekend hikes. Those things are sacred to me. They're not just stuff, they're her. My parents, on the other hand, they don't get it. They've always been well-meaning, but let's just say they're not great with boundaries. My mom especially has this habit of offering advice that no one asked for. You should eat healthier. When are you going to start dating again? Maybe you should sell the house and get a fresh start. It's always something. For the past year, they've been on this crusade to help me move on. They keep saying things like, Emily wouldn't want you to live like this. Or, it's time to let go and start living your life again. I know they mean well, or at least I want to believe they do, but it feels like they just don't understand what I'm going through. Healing isn't some checklist you can rush through. You can't just flip a switch and decide you're done grieving. A few weeks ago, they offered to come stay for the weekend. They said they wanted to help me out around the house, which, in hindsight, should have raised some red flags. My mom's version of helping usually involves reorganizing my kitchen or lecturing me about my laundry habits. But I was tired of arguing with them, so I said, sure, why not? When they arrived, everything seemed normal at first. My dad was his usual quiet self, tinkering with the leaky faucet in the kitchen, while my mom made a big deal about vacuuming the living room, like she was single-handedly saving me from being buried alive in dust. I appreciated the effort, I guess, but it also felt a little performative, like they were trying to prove a point. The first night, we had dinner together, and of course the conversation turned to Emily. My mom said something like, you know, it's been 2 years. Don't you think it's time to start moving forward? I told her as politely as I could that I wasn't ready for that yet. She sighed and said, I just hate seeing you stuck in the past. It's not healthy. I bit my tongue and changed the subject. I didn't want to fight about it. The next morning I had some errands to run. Just boring stuff, grocery shopping, picking up a package from the post office, that kind of thing. My mom said, oh, take your time, we'll hold down the fort here. I didn't think much of it. I mean, they're my parents. I trusted them. When I came back a few hours later, the house felt off. At first, I couldn't figure out why. Then I noticed the empty space on the dresser where Emily's perfume bottle had been. I walked into the living room and saw that the bookshelves were practically bare. Her favourite books, the ones she'd read and reread a dozen times, were gone. My heart started racing as I ran to the bedroom. The closet was half empty. Her wedding dress, her sweaters, even the old pair of Converse she refused to throw away, they were all gone. I found my parents in the backyard. sitting on the patio like they hadn't just ripped my heart out. I stood there, shaking, and said, "What did you do?" My mom looked up at me, completely calm, and said, "We took care of it. It was time." Took care of it? I could barely get the words out. What the hell does that mean? Where are Emily's things? She sighed, like I was the one being unreasonable, and said, "We donated some of it, and the rest, well, it wasn't worth keeping." I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. I said, "You had no right. Those were her things. They're all I have left of her." My dad finally spoke up, saying, "We just want what's best for you. You've been holding on to the past for too long. Emily wouldn't want you to live like this." At that moment, I didn't care about their intentions. All I could think about was how they'd destroyed the last pieces of Emily I had left. Her journals, her photos, her wedding dress, things that meant nothing to anyone but me. They were gone. I yelled at them to leave. I didn't care if it made me a bad son. I couldn't stand to look at them. My mom tried to argue, saying, "We did this for you," but I wasn't hearing it. I just kept saying, "Get out, now." They left, but not without a parting shot. My mom said, "You'll thank us one day. You'll see this was for the best." I spent the rest of the day digging through the trash, hoping to find anything they might have thrown away. But it was too late. Most of it was gone, probably dumped somewhere I'd never be able to get it back. I can't even describe the mix of emotions I'm feeling right now. Anger, grief, betrayal. It's like losing Emily all over again, but this time it wasn't fate. It was the people I'm supposed to trust the most. And the worst part? They still don't think they did anything wrong. They keep calling and texting, saying they're worried about me and that I need to let it go. But how do you let go of something like this? How do you forgive people who think they have the right to decide how you grieve? TLDR, my parents destroyed my late wife's belongings while I was out because they thought it was time for me to move on. I don't know how to forgive them, or if I even want to. So after my parents left, I just sat there in the house, completely numb. Everywhere I looked, there was an empty space where Emily's things used to be. Her bookshelves, practically bare. Her favourite mug that used to sit on the kitchen counter, gone. Even the framed photo of the two of us from our honeymoon in Savannah, she'd loved that picture, was nowhere to be found. It felt like they had scrubbed her out of my life, like she had never even existed. I couldn't just sit there and do nothing. I started tearing through every corner of the house, hoping maybe they had stashed some of her things somewhere. I checked the garage, the attic, even the back of the closets, but nothing. It was like they had planned this out, methodically erasing her from my home while I was out running errands. That's when I remembered my mom's comment about donating some of it. I grabbed my keys and drove straight to the nearest thrift store, hoping against hope that maybe they hadn't put the items out yet. When I got there, I ran inside and asked the cashier, practically begging, "Did someone drop off a bunch of women's clothes and books earlier today? Maybe a wedding dress?" The woman gave me a sympathetic look and said, "We did get a donation like that, but once it's processed, it goes straight to the floor. If it's not here, it might already be gone." I spent the next hour combing through racks of clothes, shelves of books, and random bins of donated items. I found a couple of her sweaters and one of her books, To Kill a Mockingbird, her favourite. But the wedding dress, the journals, the Polaroids, they were gone. Someone else had probably bought them already, not knowing how much they meant to me. I sat in my car in the parking lot, holding the sweater I'd found, and just broke down. I'm not someone who cries easily, but at that moment I couldn't hold it in. It wasn't just about the stuff, it was about what it represented. These were pieces of Emily, fragments of the life we had built together. And now they were gone, thanks to the people who were supposed to have my back. When I got home, I noticed a voicemail from my mom. I debated whether or not to listen to it, but curiosity got the better of me. Her voice was calm, almost patronizing, as she said, "Hi, honey. I just wanted to check in and make sure you're okay. I know you're upset right now, but we did what we thought was best. You've been stuck in the past for too long, and it's time for you to start living again. Emily wouldn't want you to wallow like this. Call me when you're ready to talk." I deleted the voicemail without even finishing it. I didn't want to hear their justifications or excuses. They had crossed a line. No, they had obliterated the line. This wasn't something they could just sweep under the rug or apologize for. Over the next few days, I tried to distract myself by going back to work, but it was impossible to focus. Every time I sat at my desk, I found myself replaying the scene in my head. Walking into the house, seeing the empty spaces, hearing my mom casually say, "We took care of it." I couldn't even sleep at night. I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, feeling like I had failed Emily by not protecting the things she had left behind. My dad tried calling me a few times too, but I didn't answer. He finally sent me a text that said, "I know you're upset, but you'll understand one day. We only want what's best for you." Best for me? How could they possibly think that destroying the most meaningful parts of my life was what's best? The worst part was, I couldn't talk to anyone about it. My friends were supportive when Emily passed, but over time, most of them moved on. They stopped asking how I was doing or checking in on me, assuming I was better now. How do you explain to someone that your parents destroyed your wife's wedding dress and journals because they thought it was time for you to move on? I finally decided to call my therapist. I hadn't been to a session in a while, but if there was ever a time to go back, it was now. When I told her what had happened, she just shook her head and said, "I'm so sorry. That's a horrible betrayal." She helped me talk through the anger and grief, but she also said something that stuck with me. Your grief is your own. No one else gets to decide how or when you process it. What they did wasn't about you. It was about their discomfort with your pain. That hit me like a ton of bricks. She was right. My parents weren't trying to help me. They were trying to make themselves feel better. They didn't want to see me grieving anymore because it made them uncomfortable. So, they took matters into their own hands, thinking they knew what was best, without ever stopping to ask how I felt about it. I decided that I needed to set some boundaries. The next time my mom called, I actually answered, but I didn't let her get a word in. I said, "Listen, what you did was unforgivable. You had no right to touch Emily's things, and you destroyed the only pieces of her I had left. I don't care what your intentions were. You crossed a line. Until you can acknowledge that and truly apologize, I don't want to hear from you." She started to protest, but I hung up. For once, I didn't feel guilty about it. I wasn't going to let them guilt-trip me or justify their actions anymore. It's been a couple of weeks since all this happened, and I'm still figuring out how to move forward. I've been trying to focus on the few things I was able to save, the sweater, the book, and reminding myself that Emily's memory isn't tied to her belongings. But that doesn't make what my parents did any less painful. Part of me wants to forgive them because they're my parents, but another part of me knows that forgiveness doesn't mean pretending this never happened. They broke my trust in a way that I don't know if I can ever fully repair. TLDR, my parents destroyed my late wife's belongings while I was out, thinking it would help me move on. Now I'm left grieving her all over again, but this time it feels like I'm grieving alone.